Afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to Marquette University Law School, Eckstein Hall. It's good to see everybody today. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. And today we are delighted to be joined by the president of the NCAA, Dr. Mark Emmert. Please give him a warm welcome to Marquette University Law School. Good to have you. We have an awful lot we want to talk about today, but I did want to begin by letting Dr. Emmert explain why he's at Marquette. Why do you come to universities to spend large part of a day? Why do you do that? What do you get from it?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. I was invited by the law school to come speak at this forum, and I get invitations to come to places like this, right. Though the law school, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is unique in that you have not utterly unique, but very unusual that you have a public policy forum like this, which I think, as a former professor in policy, think is a fabulous idea. So I salute you for that. And whenever I have an opportunity to come speak at a campus, I like to use it as an excuse to get to meet as many student athletes as I can, to interact with as many people around athletics and the leadership of a campus. The NCAA is a membership association, and we have 1,100 members, and so I try to get as much opportunity to get on campuses and meet that membership as I can.
What are you going to be doing this afternoon while you're here at the university?
Going to be meeting with about 200 of your student athletes. Going to be meeting with your student media folks. Going to have a little press availability after this, and then meeting with your president and athletic director and the folks in the athletic department.
I thought I'd begin today by talking about what it is you do and what it is you don't do, because I think there are some people who think you are all-powerful, that you have the same sort of clout as a Roger Goodell, a Bud Selig, a Gary Bettman, a David Stern. Is that analogy not a good one when you hear your name mentioned in the same breath of those gentlemen?
Well, I think it's a source of a great deal of confusion out there in the public. So there are days when I'm often seen as having Selig-like or Goodell-like authority. But the analogy shouldn't be a commissioner. It should be a comparison to Ban Ki-moon and the Secretary General of the UN. That's much more apt. So, as president of the NCAA, I oversee an association, a voluntary membership association, 1,100 colleges and universities and conferences, 460,000 student athletes. And they are the body that makes almost all the decisions of consequence. My job is to organize, support, and herd that process forward. Again, not unlike the Secretary General, but almost never am I in the decision-making position where I get a lot of things get attributed to me. Well, Emmert did this or Emmert did that. That's almost never the case. So, for example, when there's an infractions case, when a penalty is handed down, those are handled in a process that most of you lawyers or law students would feel very, very comfortable with. It's done through something called a committee on infractions. It's something tantamount to a jury of your peers. It's a group of a dozen or so people that include commissioners and athletic directors and faculty reps and lawyers, but none of them are employees of the NCAA. My staff will conduct investigations into a case and give the facts to that body, the Committee on Infractions, and they make all those decisions. Almost all of the policy decisions, all of the rules, everything that you love or hate about those issues is done by the membership itself. So it's a very different role than Roger Goodell's, and Roger and I get a big chuckle out of it.
So you have 1,100 institutions, and they're all, I know, just completely satisfied with the governance structure of the NCAA.
Yeah.
You actually have got a couple of big meetings coming up to discuss governance. And let me begin our discussion with a very simple question. Is the current NCAA governance model obsolete?
Well, first of all, NCAA 101, so there's these 1,100 schools. They're split into three divisions. Right. Divisions 3, Division 2, Division 1. Marquette and all the schools, virtually all the schools you see on TV are Division 1 schools. The others are typically smaller institutions. The governance for 2 and 3, everybody's very happy with. Seems to work extremely well, and it's a shared governance model that everyone likes. The Division I governance model, which means the manner in which university presidents and athletic directors and others make decisions about the rules and the policies, it's managed to coalesce everybody around one principle: no one likes it. Right? I mean, there's absolutely no one satisfied with the current model. Now, it's a bit like democracy in the Churchillian sense. It may be the worst possible, except for every other alternative. But the membership wants to explore all those alternatives right now. So through this fall and into the winter and spring, the Division I presidents, the governing presidents of the NCAA, are inviting different groups representing all of collegiate sport to come together and talk about how should they make decisions, how should they self-govern, how should they pass their rules and make decisions. It's really being driven, I think, importantly, by what's happened in Division I over the past 25 years is this huge disparity has grown mostly around money. So inside Division I, the 350 or so universities that call themselves Division I schools, you have athletic budgets, the whole athletic department, with a budget of $5 or $6 million at one extreme and 155 at the other extreme. So you've got football coaches that make more than whole schools' budgets, right, in one extreme and the other. And so when those two groups from extremes and everything in the middle come together to make decisions, they're having a really hard time finding common interest. They're having a really hard time saying what works for you works for me. So they're trying to figure out, do they need to subdivide further? Do they need to have a different way of managing the discussion? Do they need a different representational model? What does that look like? And again, it's kind of like a UN debate. You know, how do you structure this conversation to make good, thoughtful choices?
When you talk about subdividing, it seems like there's a lot of discussion right now about whether the five major football conferences, SEC, ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12, whether they sort of go off on their own and say, we're going to create our own division because we're different than a number of the institutions you mentioned. Is that something that will be on the table in these discussions?
Yeah, I think it will be. There's a group out there called faculty athletic reps. So every university has a faculty member that's identified by the rules. They have to have one. So I don't remember who the Marquette faculty athletic rep is. Probably here. Yes. So we'll describe your role here in a second. But the Division I faculty athletic reps, the 1A faculty athletic reps, the big football school faculty athletic reps, just publicly last week said, yeah, we think there ought to be a fourth division. So there'll definitely be a discussion about it. I don't know how much energy there is around that idea. But what everyone seems clear on is the things about the NCAA they like. So they love our championships. We run 89 championships. They work really well for the student athletes. The men's basketball tournaments become this iconic American event. Nobody wants to blow that up. Everybody likes that. So the debate around that extra division or a different subdivision is predominantly about football, and it's predominantly about this huge financial gap. How are people going to deploy the resources that they have when you've got this huge disparity with money?
It seems like one of the subjects that comes up within that discussion is this whole notion of paying student athletes something, and that there are universities. I saw Mac Brown, who I think is still the coach of Texas, at least last time I checked.
As of this morning's papers. Yeah.
But he tweeted and said that, hey, we make $163 million. I think our players ought to get some money. Where do we stand on that? Anything from a stipend of maybe $2,000 to $4,000 a year? What's your current thinking on that?
Yeah, so again, another hotly debated topic. It's more debated in the media than it is among the membership. One of the things that I think sets the fundamental tone is that there's very few members and virtually no university presidents, well, there's none that I've ever heard from, that think that it's a good idea to convert student athletes into paid employees, literally into professionals. Then you have something very different than collegiate athletics. There may be some people that think that's desirable, but that would be that's a model that 110 years ago the colleges and universities said they wanted to get rid of, so they created the NCAA. So for those of you that know Big Ten schools, that was the first collegiate athletic conference in the United States. Their first rule, or one of their first rules, was you could only have 2 professional football players at a time on your team. They literally had people who weren't students at all. Not like they weren't student athletes. They weren't students. You could bring anybody in and you could play anybody. And it's an interesting, not very pretty history of how sports got started. NCAA was formed. And so one of the guiding principles has been, this is about students who play sports. And then the notion of providing support for those student athletes has morphed over the years, so that for the past about 40 or more years, an athletic scholarship's been tuition fees, room and board, and books and supplies, right? Essentially a whole scholarship. What it doesn't recognize, though, is that, and all the students here know, there's also something out there called miscellaneous expenses. That's a term of art in higher education that covers the things that aren't covered by all of that. Travel to and from home, clothes, weekend food, all the odd and end things that come along with life. At most schools, that gap between tuition fees, room and board, books and supplies, plus this miscellaneous expense, it runs between $0 and $6,000. That number is actually set by the school, so there'd be a Marquette number. I don't know what it is, but let's say it's $3,000, $4,000 that they say it costs to live here and be a student. The debate is, should schools be allowed to close that gap, to increase the scholarship amount so that there's a miscellaneous expense piece that's often been called the stipend, a $2,000 stipend or whatever. The board, the governing board, the Division I governing board, a group of 20 university presidents, has twice passed a rule change saying that, yeah, schools ought to be able to give their athletes another couple $1,000, recognizing that difference. That's been overridden by the membership, because the membership can, if the board passes a rule they don't like, the membership can all vote and say, nope, we don't want that. So the membership did vote to override the board and throw that rule out. I think it's going to come back into discussion in the coming weeks and months. Some of the governance debate is focused on that issue, because schools with money are saying, gee, we'd like to be able to do that. Schools without money are saying, we couldn't afford it, and philosophically we don't like it. So that debate isn't likely to go away. What I do know is that the scholarship model that's in place is more than 40 years old. And in 40 years, everything has changed in sport, except that. And so it's high time that they have a good debate about it.
I wanted to get your reaction to the Time magazine story, which has the picture of Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel, on the cover, and says it's time to pay college athletes. They went beyond that. They said it is a moral imperative to pay college athletes. I'd like to get your reaction to that choice of words.
Yeah, well, I thought, while I profoundly disagreed with most of the things in that article, it was a pretty well-reasoned, not ridiculous argument in the sense that it wasn't, the typical diatribe. It was this one person's views. I obviously disagree, and so do, again, virtually every university president that I know of. Because, again, the notion is that these aren't employees of a university. If they want to play professional sports, there should be options for them. There aren't always, and that's an issue we need to deal with professional sports programs. But if a young man or young woman, predominantly we're talking about young men, if they want to become just a professional athlete, then they ought to have that opportunity to go become a professional athlete. They shouldn't be forced to come play college sport when what they really want to do is they don't want to be in school. They want to go play sport. Well, fine. If you're a ballerina or a ballet dancer, you don't go to college. You go right to a ballet troupe, and you don't have to make this, artificial juncture. Why? Go dance, go play, go. But if you want to come to school, you're going to be a student, and you're going to be part of that university, and that means you're going to get a fair shake in this thing, providing a full ride scholarship, maybe with this stipend added in, provided the absolute best training you can possibly get, the best academic support you can possibly get, the best opportunity to graduate. By the way, 80%, I want to say this number loud and clear, 80% of NCAA athletes finish their bachelor's degree, a very, very high number relative to the rest of the population. If you want all those opportunities, they're there. I haven't heard a lot of people argue that that's a morally unfair trade. Now, can we do more for student athletes to make this a fair proposition? Well, that's part of what's under debate right now. I think we can, but the membership's going to have to debate it.
You don't feel that in any sense of the word, the student athlete who plays, for example, at a major football power where they are literally taking in over $100 million in revenue, you don't feel that student athlete is being exploited in any way?
No, I don't. You know, the reality is they're playing in front of 100,000 people. And so it would seem that the exploitation is that they have a big audience watching them. So I suppose if we only played in front of 5,000 people, they wouldn't be exploited. I mean, the logic of that doesn't make sense to me. Are these important programs for those universities? Absolutely. Do we need to make sure that we're providing student athletes with every opportunity to get their degree, to be successful in life? Absolutely. Do we need to make sure that they have everything they need to make sure that their safety and well-being is taken care of? You bet. I think that's the exchange that goes on here. And again, if student athletes want to be professional athletes, then they ought to, and in most sports, they have the opportunity to go do that. Many of them choose to come to a university because they get better training, better exposure, better opportunity to go forth and play than ever before. In football and basketball, you know, the two major revenue sports, the relationship with professional sport is more complex, and they have rules that don't allow that. So that's one of the challenges we face.
There seems like, and I think you said at least part of it is perhaps media-driven, but this growing push for paying college athletes. Meanwhile, there's this other thing hanging out there, and that is the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit. Many people in this room are familiar with this. This is a former player at UCLA who has sued. He's now been joined by some current and former athletes. And the lawsuit essentially says we think we should be compensated for the NCAA using our likeness. I know it's still in court. There are probably things you can't say, but here's a broader question. Is the entire business model for college sports at stake in this kind of lawsuit?
Well, I'm certainly not going to talk about the specifics of the case for reasons everybody in this room would fully appreciate. It is a very complex case. It started off in a direction with an enormous amount of misinformation out in the public. The original argument was it's a likeness and image case and the right to publicity case, and the initial argument was that the NCAA forbids former student athletes from using their likeness to benefit, to sell that image or likeness, which is absolutely, utterly, patently false. Any student athlete that wants to use their likeness or image after they graduate from school and go sell it, they're perfectly able to do that, and many of them have, including Ed O'Bannon. So, you know, they can do that, and there's no prohibition against that whatsoever. They then shifted the theory of the case relatively recently to make it a straight pay-for-play case. So it's now a straight argument that we deserve some share, whatever the appropriate share is in their mind. Their argument was half of the media revenue and all the revenue. So, you know, I don't want to address that case, but the question is, what's the economic model of sport look like? You have to, I think, first look at how sports are paid for and how they're funded. There's this mythology out there that universities make enormous amounts of money off college sports, that they're raking in millions and millions of dollars. Now, there are people making a lot of money on college sports, but it is not universities. There were last year out of 1,100 universities in America, 1,100 colleges and universities that are in NCAA college sports. 25 of those 1,100 last year had positive cash flow. 25. Virtually every other school takes money, whether it's tuition money, student fee money, state money, general fund money, and puts it into their athletic department to support their sports program. Almost nobody pulls money out of athletics and puts it into the academic side of the university. There's a few schools that do that. When I was chancellor of LSU, I was able to pull $2 million a year off the top, give it to the provost, and say, here, spend it in athletics. They're now pulling $7 million a year off the top of athletics at LSU and giving it to the academic side. There's a handful, but literally only a handful of schools that do that. Everybody else loses money on college sports in terms of just straight cash flow. So if you took away revenue, what would you be taking it away from? You'd be taking it away from all the non-revenue sports. So women's sports, all the, men's soccer, golf, every women's sport, everything else at a place like Marquette, and I'm sure we have the athletic director here, everything at Marquette would be negative cash flow except for men's basketball. And so you take the revenue from your positive cash flow sports and you pay for everything else with it. So the only reason you can have a full sports program is if you have a successful basketball program or a successful men's basketball program or a successful football program. With one or two exceptions around the country, that's exactly the way these things work. So if you had something that said, yeah, we're going to give half of the revenue to the football and men's basketball players, then the impact would be enormous on everything else that goes on in college sport.
Conference realignment. This university is now part of a newly reconfigured Big East Conference. We've seen wild swings in conferences, all kinds of changes in the last couple of years. I can understand how this might be good for the bottom line of certain institutions, but what about the fan? What about the alums? What about the other student athletes and perhaps lower profile sports in those programs? Is it good for any of them?
Well, I think it's a mixed bag. First of all, the NCAA doesn't have authority over conference structure or alignments, and that's the way it should be. No university, not Marquette, not any other university, would want to allow a national body, the NCAA or somebody else, to say you must be in Conference X or Conference Y, you must take this school. That's all handled by the individual schools themselves and their conferences. So a school makes a decision, we'd like to be in that conference. They go ask those conference members, those university presidents and athletic directors, could we join your conference? And then they make a decision. So I was president of University of Washington. I was one of the guys that voted on expanding to the Pac-12 and admitting Utah and Colorado into making the Pac-10, Pac-12. Those are decisions that presidents of those schools make. Clearly, a big part of all of what we just saw, especially with the top 5 conferences, was about money. Was about trying to come up with the most highly marketable media affiliations that you could to try and capture some market. It's more complex than that. Schools want schools that are like in many ways and that fit each other, preferably geographically, preferably the kind of schools fit. They have a lot of things in common. So the presidents and ADs think a lot about that with their commissioners, but those big moves were certainly about trying to get the best media contracts that they could as they went forward. You saw in the new Big East a group of presidents saying, we want to be with schools that are like us, right? So private schools, mid-sized to small private schools, most all of them Catholic affiliation, strong basketball schools, a broad geographic footprint, but one that made sense. So you could look at what happened with the Big East and say, that makes some sense. I understand that. We have a lot more in common with Georgetown and Marquette than Georgetown and East Carolina, right? So that made some good sense. Where I was concerned in the engagement that I had with commissioners and presidents was saying, keep an eye on the student athletes. We had at one point some configurations that were literally going to have student athletes flying coast to coast, playing a game, flying back and going to class. Well, that's just...
We talk about Boise State joining the Big East.
Yeah, Boise State playing in Tampa, Florida. That starts to get... Now, they were only going to play football, but nonetheless, even with the football team moving it, those distances would have been challenging, to say the least.
Let me spend a couple of minutes on enforcement. And there have been a couple of stories in the news. We'll get to those in just a moment. But let me begin with a very simple question. Does the NCAA have adequate resources to enforce that the rules by which universities are supposed to abide are actually enforced?
Yeah, great question. So we have, again, to separate out the enforcement part, we, the NCAA, and the national office, my staff, we have about 50 people who are investigators, if you will. And their job is to look into allegations. Allegations come to us as anonymous tips or a media story or, self-reporting by a university. A university calls up, AD calls up and says, I think I got a problem here. And so you have a lot of self-reporting that goes on. And then this staff goes out. They work with the university. Here's a wrinkle in this that's quite unusual. Under a collaborative model, they work with the university to try and ascertain what the real facts are. So the university is literally a partner in trying to figure out what the facts are. And sometimes there's conflicts in that, right? Because everybody has a lot at stake here. Then they come to an agreement about what the facts really are. And then those facts are taken again to this jury of the peers, the Committee on Infractions. And both sides have a chance to present whatever data they have. And then the committee renders whatever its verdict is. The huge limitation that my investigators have is we're a nonprofit association. We're not a government agency. So no subpoena power, no capacity to compel anybody to provide evidence or information unless they're part of an NCAA member institution. So an athlete can't say, I won't talk to you. A coach can't say, I won't talk to you. But somebody who's a third party who's independent, let's say an agent, they can say, I'm not talking to you. A reporter can say, I'm not talking to you. And we have no way to compel them to testify. So sometimes you'll get a story in the media. Someone will go to the media and say, oh, yeah, I gave Joe Blow a bunch of money or Sally Sue a bunch of this or that. And then my investigators come in and they say, well, could you show me the data? Well, I'm not talking to you. So the story's been all over the media from anonymous sources, but then when an NCAA investigator is sitting there with a university lawyer, then no, we're not talking. So it's not that we don't have the resources. These are very good, very able people. But the way they have to do their investigation is much more like investigative journalism than it is a law enforcement activity.
You've explained the process and with the limitations you see as inherent in that. Does the NCAA have any official reaction to a couple of the stories that have been reported in the last 2 weeks? You had Sports Illustrated did a big piece on Oklahoma State's football program, allegations of players being paid, academic fraud, and other things. And then we recently had the report by Yahoo Sports about about 5 SEC players receiving money from someone who, for lack of a better way of putting it, is a middleman, perhaps representing sports agents. It's a long-winded explanation of what we're dealing with, but do you have any reaction to either of those developments, and how does the NCAA determine what course it takes next?
Well, in a word, no. But having said that,
a long way to go for a no.
I'll embellish my no a little bit. So we have a very important, long-standing policy that we don't comment on cases, individual cases. But we do pay great attention to what's in the media because in some cases it's a very important source of information. You have to, as quickly as possible, determine what's fact and what's fiction, what's a disgruntled person talking to a reporter versus a documentable fact, and those are things again that are not dissimilar from a criminal investigation, only you don't have subpoena power. So whenever you read a story like that, there's some reasonable expectation that the NCAA would be having conversations as well. I think I answered that well.
So here's what strikes me about those stories. Most of you in this room are not old enough to remember the mid-1980s, but a few of you are. They were good years. But anyhow, in the mid-1980s, you had Southern Methodist University, and there were improprieties by that institution, resulted in the death penalty for a couple of years. I'm struck by the reaction to these stories by prominent media entities, and the reaction I would characterize as a collective yawn on the part of the public. So my question is, what does that say about us and what we expect from these high-profile football programs? What does it say about the public's faith that the NCAA can enforce the rules that universities are supposed to play by?
Yeah, I think that's the more important issue, frankly. I think that when we have a case like that, and again, we don't know what the facts are, but nonetheless, they're very prominent stories, and they're met with a collective yawn. That's cause for concern more than any one individual case, perhaps. I don't know, and there's really no way of empirically knowing whether there's more or less cheating going on than the 80s. It's one of those inherently unknowable things like criminal behavior usually is. But if you talk to people who have been in the collegiate sport world for 20, 30, 40 years, they will routinely tell me that there's less cheating going on here and probably a lot less cheating going on right now. Not because necessarily people are more admirable, but because it's harder to get away with. The reality is that in the world of social media, in the world of everybody carrying a recorder and a cell phone around with them, in a world where there's very limited privacy, it's become common for folks from competitor schools to say, I saw that kid over there with an agent, and the next thing you know, there's photographs, there's information floating around. So, and then the other piece that I think is very heartening is that while the world may be yawning, universities for the most part haven't been. We saw a year and a half ago a season where a number of very prominent head coaches from very prominent programs lost their jobs over a variety of issues like these. And that's almost never happened. There was always this argument, well, program X is untouchable, program Y is untouchable, but yet a lot of major programs are having a lot of difficulty, and university leadership and ADs and others are not being particularly tolerant, which is a good thing. So it's disappointing that it's all met with a collective yawn, but I think that doesn't line up with the behavior of what's actually happening on campuses.
Quick question about Penn State. Some would probably argue is one of the defining moments of your tenure so far. Again, there is some litigation involved in that. Understand that may complicate this discussion, or it may make for a very brief discussion. But when you look back at Penn State, do you still feel comfortable that the punishment that affects current student athletes, that affect coaches who weren't there at the time of the Jerry Sandusky situation, do you feel that the punishment is still what it should have been, given the nature of what happened there?
Well, let me first answer by describing what did and didn't happen, because there's a lot of confusion around that case. Again, there's the confusion thinking that I'm a commissioner of a sports league, for one. So when the Penn State case broke, it was obviously, and this would have been in November, I guess, it was obviously a very shocking story. Everyone was kind of amazed by it around the country. The university took a number of very swift and decisive personnel actions. And then they launched the now well-known Free investigation, hired Louis Freeh, former head of the FBI, very distinguished guy, and his law firm, to conduct an investigation. They conduct an investigation over many months' time, and it involves interviewing 450 people. The university compelled everybody in the university to provide them with all kinds of data. They did an investigation that was, remembering back to our conversation about our investigations, the free report investigation was dramatically greater than anything that the NCAA ever could have done for all kinds of reasons. So then when that finishes up, we have essentially investigation finished, and the university agreed with the NCAA that we don't need to conduct any more investigations over the next year. We need to say, yeah, those are the facts. Let's move forward with this. The governing structure of the NCAA has something called the Executive Committee, which is a group of presidents from all three divisions, Division I, Division II, Division III, and they're my bosses. They have the ultimate authority over the association. And then there's a Division I board, some of whom also sit on that Executive Committee, but it's about 20 presidents representing all of Division I. They got together over multiple occasions, talked about this case, talked about what should be done, talked about its completely unusual character. The NCAA has never seen anything like this. It wasn't like somebody taking money on the side. There's never been anything in higher ed history like this. You've never seen anything even approaching it. So they, working with me, agreed on a package of sanctions that they thought would be appropriate to this particular case. They then delegated to me, for this one time only, the authority to go work with Penn State on a consent decree that Penn State would say, okay, yeah, that's fine, we'll do this, let's get this behind us, let's move on, and that's what was done. And so this set of penalties was crafted to really try and do two things. Yeah, there's a piece of it that's punitive, right? And that's what happens often in any NCAA case, is that the punitive component gets, and no one likes this, by the way, including me, but you wind up leveling it on an institution, and many of the bad actors are gone. If there's anybody from USC in the audience, you would know what I'm talking about, right? So USC is saying, oh my gosh, Reggie Bush is in the pros, he's a millionaire now, and everybody's gone, and we didn't get to go to a bowl game, and we don't have all our scholarships back. What does that have to do with us? But that's unfortunately one of the things that has to be done, because you don't have authority to get at the people that have left. So it's about trying to create an environment where an institution says, we don't want to be in that spot, because bad things will happen to this institution, to this university, this college, not just to those people. So that's part of what the NCAA has been doing for 50 years. The more complicated part of the Penn State sanctions have really been aimed at, with evidence that it's been successful, have aimed at trying to get the university to rein in and get under control a culture that allowed some of those things to occur. So the pieces, again, this is a great forum to talk about this, the pieces that the world hasn't really paid attention to aren't just the bowl bans, it's that we worked with them and with outside legal counsel to create an athletic integrity agreement, the first of its kind, a 5-year agreement that says you will do the following things to put in place these activities and these checks and balances to make sure that your athletic program is being conducted with the highest level of integrity. We then hired Senator George Mitchell and his firm to be the monitors to monitor it. They just handed us their first year report just a couple weeks ago, about 10 days ago, I guess. And it indicates Penn State's making huge strides. They're doing a lot of really, really good things. Well, that's what the board's really looking at, and the executive committee is, how's Penn State responding here? So I think the executive committee feels very good about what they did and how they did it. But they're also pleased with the way Penn State's responding, which is very, very positively.
I don't know if you're prepared to answer this, but would there be any chance that the punishment, for lack of a better word, handed down could be amended slightly based on what Penn State has done so far? And you've praised their efforts so far. Yeah. Is that something that would be looked at?
Well, it's a consent decree, so if both parties agree,
right,
you can always modify a consent decree. So the consent decree had in it that at the end of 2 years there'd be a review of the monitoring process, that the senator would provide information at that stage, and I'm sure the executive committee will look at that very seriously. But they have the opportunity to do so anytime they would like.
Here's my final question, then we'll open it up to audience questions. The job you're in, man, you're a lightning rod. As I was doing some prep work for this, I was looking at You
Googled me, huh?
Yeah, I did, and there's some people who are not fans. I'm wondering how you feel about this job. I mean, you went from, I know being a university president is a very easy, simple existence where no one ever criticizes you, but it seems like you went into something with even more fire attached to it.
Well, you have to try and depersonalize it to the sense sense that you can, which is very hard for anybody, and occasionally even me, of course. But the fact is that the NCAA has forever been criticized as an amorphous bureaucracy, and this faceless, amorphous bureaucracy, and no one knew what it was and how it operated. And when the board, the executive committee hired me, one of the things they wanted was for me to put a face on the NCAA, and I did, and that works well in some cases and not so well in the others. So, you wind up being the face of an organization not everybody loves, and I get that, and I certainly haven't done everything perfectly. I've done some things wrong along the way here too, and so I'm more than happy to share blame where it's appropriate. But the reality is that college athletics, this is a good thing, inspires enormous passion. It is something that Americans, no other country in the world does this. Americans are uniquely passionate about college sport. You go to have this conversation in Britain or Asia or somewhere, and they look at you like you're from Mars, because they have no idea what this conversation would even be about. We care a lot about it. It's how we identify and connect with our schools. We wear our school colors. People get buried in their school colors sometimes. I mean, it really instills passion in people. And so when they see something they don't like, they react to it, and often very viscerally, and that's okay, because it means they care about it as long as they're not crazy. Then I'm fine.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Here's the deal. For those of you in the seating bowl, press down on the rim, not on the button. Keep your finger on the rim. We'll be able to hear the question. Ryan will do what he can to make sure that we're all heard. And the other thing is, please, no speeches. Let's just ask a question, and then we'll get to as many of them as possible. So please raise your hand. Right, go ahead.
Thank you so much for coming today. Being with us at Marquette. One of the things we in Wisconsin know is that when Max McGee left his beloved Tulane University to join the Green Bay Packers, he complained bitterly to Coach Lombardi that he had to take a cut in pay. Our resident philosopher at Marquette, a non-Jesuit named Al McGuire, always said, when they say it's not about the money, it's about the money. And with that in mind, given the enormous revenue involved in college football and college basketball, how does the NCAA, how are you able to balance the jobs you have of trying to discipline programs when discipline might make them less successful, less revenue, fans and alumni support? How do you balance that given the realities that it's about the money?
Yeah, I think you've just described very nicely this enormous tension right now that's growing between what you and I would probably recognize as a collegiate model and a commercial model. And those two, by the way, this is nothing new. The very first collegiate athletic event in American history was just before the Civil War. It was a rowing contest between Yale and Harvard. And it occurred in Lake Winnipesaukee, which is in, if you know your geography, in New Hampshire. And one would wonder why in New Hampshire. Well, it's because the event was staged by a railroad magnate who had built a railroad there, and he needed to have some reason for people to go to his new lodge. So he hired the teams to go up and do a commercial event to sell railroad tickets. That's the first and telling event. In the turn of the century, just about would have been in the 20s, maybe not quite that early, might have been in the teens, so around 100 years ago, Yale had in its athletic department at year end a balance of about $500,000. Now think about an athletic department with $500,000 balance in 1915. I mean, that was real dough. And they didn't have any media contracts. Right? The largest athletic events in America were all college athletic events, and they were all commercial endeavors. A guy at Princeton raised the ticket price from 25 cents to 50 cents because he thought he could get it. Everybody went crazy but still paid it, and then the guy who did it was the student manager, Woodrow Wilson, and it didn't hurt him at all. It worked out okay. So this tension has been going on forever and ever. It has gotten greater now because I think that the magnitude of the dollars has gotten really, really large, right? And that's because of the invention of TV and the mass popularity of college sport and the invention of the internet. So with new technology, real-time TV, especially young people here don't watch TV. You don't watch primetime TV in prime time. You watch it whenever you want to on Netflix or whatever you want. So for media people, the most valuable media products now are things you have to watch in real time. And that's sports and Dancing with the Stars. And right? And because you got to talk about it at in the office the next day. So we're seeing an explosion in the value of the sports media properties, as they call it in the biz, and that's injected a lot of revenue into those sports that people really want to watch. And right now in America, that's the top handful of conferences in football. So it's just ballooned. So that's led to a lot of the discussion. It's not that people didn't think that there was money being passed to student athletes 50 years ago. It's that all of a sudden now there's just a lot more money and coaches are making massive amounts of money, and we all get all of that. And so I think that this whole notion of, first and foremost, treating the student athletes in a fair fashion while still maintaining them as student athletes is at the core of all of this. And if we make sure we do that, and that probably requires some changes in what we do today, I think that will be very, very helpful. We also do a fair amount of revenue sharing across college sport, but where the revenue goes is also a source of great confusion. So I heard a sportscaster on ESPN not long ago, a very, very well-known sportscaster who is, and name if I said it, you would all know immediately who he is. He said, gee, I hope the big conferences pull away so they can finally pull away from the NCAA so they can finally keep their football money. Now that would be an interesting statement, except for the fact the NCAA never touches a penny of football money. And this guy should have known it. All the football money goes right to the conferences. Never comes through us. We don't have anything to do with regular season media contracts or football money or bowl money or anything to do with football. We in the NCAA only have revenue that comes from the broadcasts and ticket sales of our championships. 90+% of which is the men's basketball championship. So we have a terrible business model. We make all our money in 1 week, a 3-week period. Actually, it's 3 weeks, but it's one event. That event crashes, we got a problem. We share that revenue pretty widely. We could debate about what the model looks like, but all of the members, including Division III, get some of that revenue. That's how they stay alive. What's happened is the concentration of money in a handful of conferences that doesn't get shared is really causing a huge imbalance in the process, and that's the source of a lot of debate. How the membership wants to work that out is anyone's guess, but I think that in there lies some of the resolution of that tension as well.
Let me take some other questions.
I'll answer more shortly, I promise.
Yes, sir.
How would you react to the perception that like the sports like the NFL and the NBA has kind of treated the NCAA like a very efficient minor leagues, and do you think there is any way to work with those leagues to maybe get rid of that perception?
Yeah, so could you all hear the question? No? So the question was, I'll paraphrase if I may, that can we work with the professional leagues to, because at least in the case of the NBA and NFL, college sports is treated like the minor leagues or the training grounds for their athletes, and is there some resolution of that, and how do we feel about it? Well, first of all, again, a lot of confusion about those relationships. So a lot of folks, including me, have been critical of the so-called one-and-done rule in basketball. For those of you who don't know the rule is you can go play ball for a university and then after 1 year go into the NBA. That is not our rule. Those are rules of the NBA. So the professional leagues, because they are governed by collective bargaining agreements, have the ability to say who can and who cannot come participate in their business endeavor. And so they said back in 2005, you cannot come play in the NBA. Remember, LeBron went without going to college, and Kobe went without going to college, and you used to be able to do that. And I think it was 2005. Don't quote me, but I think that's the right date. Somewhere around there, the NBA said, no, you gotta go to college for a year, and then you can come to us. And so you have this phenomenon of people coming in for a year who really don't want to be there, perhaps. I'm saying perhaps because I don't know their motivations. And they may or may not be serious students, perhaps. And what they really want to do is go to the NBA and become NBA players. Great. I got nothing wrong with that. That's a noble thing to do. But it winds up making them come to us, jump on as soon as they can, and they're not necessarily fully embedded in their university as a real university student. We talk a lot with the NBA leadership about that. David Stern and I and Adam Silver and I have talked a lot about it. We've got a lot of people involved in the conversation. They're having leadership transitions in the Players Association right now. There's some people that like it, some people that don't. And I'm hopeful that we can move to a model that works better, a model that seems to work quite well for baseball, as you may know, because they have minor leagues, is in baseball you can go to minor leagues, you can go to the pros, minor or major, right out of high school. They have a draft for 17-year-olds, high school seniors. You can go play ball, but if you go to college, you have to stay 3 years or until you're 21. And so for baseball players, the ones that want to go pro can go. Those others come to us. That model works really nicely. They stay 3 years. A large percentage of them are getting degrees now, and we're driving that number up a lot in the past handful of years. So we're getting a lot more success. It's a dynamic tension that we really need to work on because it's at part of the heart of what we're talking about here. I would love to be in a world where if a young person has the skill and ability and the drive and wants to go do something professionally, vocationally, and they don't want to go to college, go do it. If you want to be a writer and you can do it at 18, go do it. Fine. Why would we want to force somebody to go to school when they really don't want to be there? But if you come to us, you're going to be a student. You're going to be an athlete. You're going to be a student. We're going to support you every way we can. But it's not about being that training ground. Easy to say, very hard to accomplish.
Check it. Anybody in this section over here? I want to be fair. I'll go down the bottom.
Yeah, Doctor, I'd like to ask you, listening to your comments earlier, you're suggesting that it would be naive to believe that the NCAA will change to a system where student athletes become paid employees during your tenure. Is that correct?
I don't think I used the word naive.
So I'm saying,
I said that I've never spoken to a university president, and since ultimately these are their decisions, who believes that converting students to paid employees is a good idea.
do you imagine that changing? Will public opinion help change those presidents' minds? What role does public opinion have in this?
I would be very surprised if they change their opinion on that issue.
Okay.
All right. Other questions? Yes, sir.
The well-intended law of Title IX, has it accomplished what it was intended to do? And number two, what is the fallout in regards to other sports like wrestling, baseball that were cannibalized?
So I'll answer two ways. One will be providing fact, and the other will be my opinion. Okay. So the facts are that over the past 40 years, so this is this year was the 40th anniversary of Title IX. The success of women athletes and girls in athletics has been almost like nothing we've seen in American society. It's been extraordinary. It's exploded. I always use the example of three women that I know, my wife, my daughter, and my granddaughter. I guess one's not a woman, but she's 2.5. But my wife is easily the most athletic of the family. We went to the same high school in a small town in Washington State. There was one sport for girls, and that was tennis. That was it. And she would have been a stunningly good high school athlete. No opportunity. My daughter, who is a pretty good athlete, she played every sport she could think of in high school. Never dawned on her that those things wouldn't be available to her. Played rec sports. It wasn't good enough to play at the collegiate level, but played rec sports all through school and is a very active athlete today. My granddaughter, I hope, will never even think about the notion that those things aren't there. I'm sure someday she'll say, "Really, Grandpa? Really? How dumb were you guys?" I hope that's the world she gets. So the success in providing opportunities for women is an undeniable fact. And I'm very supportive of it because of that, because I don't know, we can't run the experiment backward and say, well, would those things have happened anyway? But we can with some confidence say they certainly happened more rapidly, and they certainly have provided a lot of energy around investment at the collegiate and high school level and beyond in sports for girls and women. The notion that this has come at a cost of men's sports, I'll give you just another fact. During that same time frame, male participation in collegiate sport has gone up. So there are more boys and men playing college sports now than ever before, and that's a good thing too. So it's hard to go back and say, well, these things were funded at the cost of this or that. It is true that some male sports have declined in popularity, wrestling being the obvious example. Indeed, it was tossed down to the Olympics for one Olympic and got its way back in, I guess, now, which is, I think, a very good thing. But there's a handful of sports, men's gymnastics, wrestling, a few others that are clearly on the decline. And so there is correlation. Whether there's causation, I'll leave to somebody that's better at linear regression analysis than me. But I'm a big fan of it and a big supporter.
Mm-hmm. Let's take maybe one or two more quick questions. Yes.
Every year we hear about schools cutting non-revenue sports.
Mm-hmm.
Here at Marquette, we've been lucky. We've been able to add men's and women's lacrosse. But how is the NCAA involved when a school makes that decision?
Yeah, so the only way that we're involved directly is that there are sport minimums at each division that a school has to maintain. So if you're a Division I school, you got to maintain X number of sports, and et cetera, et cetera. And we have a basic assumption that you'll follow the law, meaning you'll be in compliance with Title IX. So if we see things that looks like it's moving in and out of balance, we're more than likely to raise that issue. We used to have a 10-year certification process. It looks like an accreditation process. We've just moved away from that. We're bringing online an annual, basically, feedback model for athletic directors and presidents that'll give them data every year. So they can track their Title IX compliance, their revenues relative to their competitors, their expenditures relative to their competitors, so they have good management information data if you can. But the elimination of individual sports, like the elimination of an individual academic program, that's got to be up to the individual school. As long as they're staying above the NCAA minimums, they get to make those decisions. And those are hard decisions. On my tenure at Washington, we eliminated swimming and diving. Hated it. Had a great coach, had some wonderful student athletes, but we needed to make some big investments in the program. Our athletic department was break even, and I had always said to the AD, you can ask me for anything except money. And so his job was to keep that program afloat. Financially, I just laid off 500 employees of the university. The athletic department wasn't going to be any different, and so I had to close the program. And talking to student athletes who just had their program closed down is not fun. But we may see that as costs increase, and while again everyone thinks schools are making a ton of money off athletics, 25 had positive cash flow. Everybody else had negative cash flow on their sports program. So it's this interesting dichotomy right now between the haves and have-nots.
I'm going to wrap things up here because I want to ask one question. Even though this is a room filled with, I think, largely Marquette enthusiasts, I have to ask this because I'm sure a few of you, especially the young folks in this room, stayed up late on Saturday night watching the football game between Wisconsin and Arizona State.
Yes.
It ended in a somewhat controversial way. So, understanding that we are here, and there are probably some Marquette people who are delighted with the outcome of that game. And he's also the University of Washington's former president, Pac-12
guy. Yeah.
But I just want to ask you about, there are a lot of questions about officiating arising from that specific incident.
Sure.
Do you have any comment on that?
No. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so officiating, again, by the time I finish this talk, you're going to think Mark Emmert's the biggest wimp in the world, that he has no authority. So we don't have any authority over officiating during the regular season, because we really don't. So the way officiating works is it's kind of a cottage industry. So all the officials are independent contractors who contract with the conference, and they work for the conference, and there's a conference coordinator of officiating by sport. And we have one at the national level that we work with. So they get together in the preseason and they say, okay, what's an area of emphasis this year? Well, it's the new rules about targeting, for example, and how are we going to call that? And so they work on that and they work on education together. But the complaints right now should be leveled at, any concerns or complaints need to go to Larry Scott, Commissioner, Pac-12 Conference. Just a minute, I'll give you his address. So that issue is Larry's, and so Larry is literally dealing with this, and we get involved only if we see something systemic across the country. So if we saw, a lot of things not working right, we'd get people together and say, what's going on here? But a blown call, not that was, but a blown call, here or there is something we don't get involved in until it's our championships. Then we're responsible for it. So if you're mad at a call during an NCAA basketball tournament, then you can call me, and I have responsibility for that. And the game inside a game that you never notice with, like our basketball tournament, all of our tournaments, is that the players are competing to move to the next level, so are the officials. So we always have, like in our tournament in basketball, we'll have 4 people scoring the refs. And then they get together at the end and say, okay, this team gets to advance, this team doesn't, of refs, not of players. So they, of course, want to get to the top because it's prestigious and they get to keep coaching and, that's financially advantageous, or keep officiating. So we have responsibility for that, but I thought that was a really, really weird ending to a game.
It was a weird ending.
I've never seen anything like it. It was bizarre.
I want to mention one thing for the media folks who are here. Dr. Emmert's going to stick around for about another 15 minutes or so. I think you're supposed to hook up with Chris Jenkins over there from Marquette, and Dr. Emmert will be good enough to answer a few media questions. But before we go, I just want to thank everybody in this room for their attention and their attendance, and most of all, I want to thank Dr. Mark Emmert for his time today.
Enjoyed it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.